Hello, welcome to another episode of Shattered Lives, the Irish Daily Star's crime podcast. I'm Mick O'Toole, the paper's crime correspondent. Joining me now to discuss another week in the turbulent world of Irish crime is our chief reporter, Paul Healy. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Mick.
So we've had another busy week.
Yes, crime never sleeps, and we have a lot to talk.
Do you know, it's absolutely true. I don't think we'll ever have any worries about what we're going to talk about in these crime reviews. I personally quite like the crime reviews, and I think our listeners do as well. So let's get cracking.
Yeah, so which controversial subject would you like to discuss first?
There are several issues I want to talk about, but I personally want to talk about the issue of Garda corruption, which we've been reporting on extensively. I did a story a good while ago about a Garda who's under investigation by the anti-corruption unit for allegedly paying a criminal €300 to attack a female Garda's house. Now that guard has been suspended. Now that was it was pretty serious, that story, and there was a significant reaction to it when we ran it in the Star, and we had it up on the Mirror online as well. But earlier this week I did another story on a separate issue, but it is a Garda anti-corruption unit investigation. So the anti-corruption unit, as the title says, it goes after allegations of corruption within the Garda Síochána. It was set up in mid-2021. Joanna O'Leary is the Garda Chief Superintendent in charge of it, and then and the oversight is by Garda Assistant Commissioner. Now, I learned in the last while or so, when we did the story a few days ago, that we knew that there was a Garda investigation into allegations that some Gardaí in the Dublin area, the DMR as it's called, Dublin Metropolitan Region, in that area, they were suspended in late 2021 as part of a Garda anti-corruption unit investigation into allegations that they were shaking down delivery drivers in the Dublin area. In other words, they were extorting money from them. So, Paul, I remember you did a story that there was a Garda station was searched as part of that operation.
Yes, I can recall that, and it's funny how stories exit your brain and they come back in. So when you heard of this development, I had to remind myself of it. But just the central allegation that they were extorting delivery drivers, the sums of €50, am I right, at a time? I mean, it just seems so petty, and yet an elaborate scheme between a number of Gardaí. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
It's quite, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It is quite staggering. And Gardaí, the reason why I'm talking about this, Gardaí, I know that Gardaí on the front line that Paul and I would both speak to are horrified by this case. One of them described it to me as, sounds like an organised, actually he didn't say sounds like, he said that's an organised crime gang. So there's an awful lot of it's one of the strongest stories feedback-wise that I've done in a while. But anyway, look, the update we did was, obviously, as you said, it was in September 2021 that the Garda station was searched. We know that lockers were opened and four Gardaí were suspended. So everybody sort of forgot about it. But then I learned in the last while that there have been a number of arrests. We know that one guard was arrested on suspicion of burglary because people are alleged to have gone into a Brazilian person's house, and taken things, so that's burglary. And then another person is alleged to have, or was arrested on suspicion of and questioned about perverting the course of justice, and that's essentially, it was about providing a false alibi. But it's an ongoing investigation, and the Garda Síochána did tell me it's an ongoing investigation, so I think there will probably be further developments. I won't really go down that road, but I just want to talk about the sense of shock that, sometimes we do stories and you think they're pretty big, and there's no reaction, but the reaction to that story, it has been pretty sensational. And I have to say, I'm really, really shocked by this, and I think most Gardaí that we would speak to are very shocked by this as well, Paul.
Yeah, I'm completely stunned by it. I mean, there is a feeling within the guards at times as well, about investigations into corruption and how it might, the perception of how it might make them all appear. But the vast majority do feel, look, you have to get rid of the bad eggs. Bad eggs are putting us all down. And it's kind of real life line of duty, isn't it? Going after bad cops. And I mean, we're reading more and more stories of it because the establishment of this unit is relatively recent, isn't it?
Yeah, and what I do want to say, I've covered, in my 23 years in the Star, I've covered well over a dozen cases like this, Gardaí being arrested. There's one case, I can't really go into it, but there was one really bad case in the last few years, which I covered. I've done cases of Garda up to really up to no good, and they've been caught by Garda, and guards would always say, listen, we got him or her, we did our job and we got them. But I have never once, maybe it's 2 dozen, guards who I've reported on, not once have I ever been contacted by a cop or a Garda to say, I'll leave him alone or leave them alone. Every single time it's that so-and-so deserves everything he gets. So there's never any, it's not as if it's, they're circling ranks. All I can tell you is every case I've done, the guards have got them, and other Gardaí have said he or she deserves everything she gets. But this is a long-running investigation, and I think there's a good way to go, and there will be, the people were arrested, they weren't charged, they were questioned and then released for the files to the DPP. So there will be a file to the Director of Public Prosecution. And it is not impossible that these people involved in this investigation will be charged and face very serious criminal sanction.
Are these members suspended currently, Mick? Yes?
Yes, we understand. I remember actually your story had this. There were 4 Gardaí suspended. I think there was 1, but then you broke the story about 3 others being suspended and another Garda station being searched. So yes, look, these people are suspended, and there are other. I mean, that guard I did the story about the alleged €300 payment. That guard is also suspended. So I think there's about 70 Gardaí suspended. But I just wanted to talk about that one case because I don't use this word advisedly. I was contacted by a lot of guards after it, and sure Paul was, and it was a seismic reaction to it. They were genuinely horrified by the details we had in the Star about it. So look, it's an on-running thing. So I just wanted to talk about that, and I also wanted to say that the guards are going after these. It's the guards who go after these suspects, and it's people in other parts of Garda Síochána are horrified to it. Anyway, we might talk next about the really sad case of Josh Dunne.
Yes, well, Josh Dunne lost his life in 2020 in an incident in East Wall. He was stabbed to death, and there was an individual that went on trial, George Gonzaga Vento, for his murder, but he was acquitted of murder. Other individuals have since been before the courts in relation to the theft of a bike that led to this incident and have been convicted in relation to that. It was an incident that drew headlines over the course of the past 2 years, the pandemic, and the family very much have been quite media friendly, and I have a good relationship with Josh's mother, Diane. And she's a grieving mother, and she's trying to remember Josh every day. And there's been a memorial cup in his honour. He's from Ballymun, and there is a wonderful tribute to him up there in Coolty Green. There's a bench with his name on it and flowers, and it's very well tended to by the community and by Josh's family. And so it's important. It's been important for Diane the whole way through. For her to have her son remembered, that's the most important thing. But a development that happened this week that I think it's very sad, but it's something Diane wanted to highlight, and something she initially highlighted on her social media because she has kept people updated because this case has affected so many people. But she asked for the clothes that Josh was wearing back from the guards, and now that these other individuals have been convicted in the courts and the other matter has been dealt with, the guards have no evidential reason to hold on to this stuff anymore. So Diane received a box containing the last clothes that Josh was wearing on the day that he was killed. Now she told me that she hasn't brought herself to be able to open that yet. She just has she says she will, but she just currently can't bring herself to look at those clothes. It's obviously very sad and very tragic for her, but it's I suppose it highlights, the impact of crime, even after all this time, that it's still having the raw impact. But for Diane, it's important for her, as she said, to have that one last piece of Josh back in her life. Even as she says at the moment, she's not able to bring herself to open it. Just to have the last thing that he had on him back in her possession was very important to her.
And that's something most people very rarely think about. A murder victim, his or her final clothes being given back to the family. But that does happen. But it just goes to show you that there are so many layers to a family's grief. and clothes. That's obviously a very visceral link for any family.
I'll correct myself. I said that the incident happened in 2020. It actually happened on the 26th of January 2021.
Yeah, and I think let's give a wee bit of context in this, because I think this is important. So there was a theft of a bike belonging to, I think it was another Brazilian delivery driver. Mr. Bento was, and he got involved in it, and there was a confrontation with someone that they believed had stolen the bike. But that wasn't Josh, and it's really important to say this. Essentially, Josh was with his pals. He definitely played for Bohemians under 16. I think, did he play for St. Kevin's as well? Yeah, so he's a very talented footballer. And what I remember at the time, he and his buddies essentially were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the person who was in effectively a fight with two Brazilians said, "Back me up here." And that's just literally a second changes somebody's life and ends somebody's life. But Josh wasn't involved in criminality himself at all.
He wasn't, and it's very worthwhile pointing that out. And what this came out in the most recent trial of Gavin Dooner, who got a 2-year sentence for stealing the bike of the delivery driver. A fact that came out of it. This was very important to Josh's family. Judge Martin Nolan was told by a barrister in the case that Josh had no connection, good, bad or indifferent, with any of the parties that had been in the area for legitimate business. So he was effectively vindicated in the courts, and that was very important to Josh's family, that it was stated that he was just an innocent teenager, 16-year-old boy whose life was sadly taken in this incident, but he was not involved in the theft of the bike or any criminality whatsoever, and sadly, tragically, he lost his life in this terrible incident.
And just in relation to Mr. Bento, as you say, he was charged with murder. He was found not guilty. He was acquitted, and I think his evidence was not in relation to Josh, but in relation to the earlier fight, shall we say. He did fear for his life, and that was, he acted in a certain way to defend himself, and the jury we don't know what juries decide, but the jury sided with that. Made a certain decision. Yes. Well, effectively the jury did decide with him. Yeah, so tragic case.
Yes, and he's no longer living in the jurisdiction now. I believe he's back in Brazil.
Yeah, no winners in this at all. We might move on to talk about a story I had in the Star today about a case of a man called Paul Wells, and it's just really, maybe it's indicative of how stories arrive. I'll talk about this. I was talking to someone about the story I had a few days ago about the Garda arrested over the shakedown of the Brazilians, and I was talking about it, and that person was quite, and basically had very strong views about the whole investigation, and he thought it was horrendous what was happening to the alleged victims, and it's just one of the things in journalism. I said, any other crack? Not really. And then they said, well, there were a couple of firearms found in Finglas last week, and that just perked up my ears, because whenever I heard this, I thought, is it the Fleishy Gang? We all know about the Fleishy Gang in Finglas. So I started making inquiries, and I established it was in a house that at the time had been owned by a man called Paul Wells, who in 2018 he got a life sentence for the February 2016 murder of a man called Kenneth O'Brien. It was a notorious crime. They were pals, and Wells shot Kenneth O'Brien in the head in his house in Finglas, in Wells's house in Finglas, and then disposed of the body in the most gruesome of ways. He dismembered the body with a chainsaw and dumped the body in various parts in the Grand Canal, and the body was found, and the guards carried out a major investigation, and that led to Paul Wells from Finglas being convicted of murder. Now, they never found the murder weapon. He told Garda he admitted killing Mr. O'Brien, but he said it was manslaughter. He said there was a fight and that he essentially panicked. And he said he broke up the gun used in the killing and he threw it out around Strawberry Beds, which is at the River Liffey there in Lucan. So I heard about these, and it turned out, my story in the last couple of days was, workmen were working on Wells' old house on St. Patrick's Day. And they were doing work, and they're working on a cavity wall, and they opened the cavity wall or whatever, and they found a machine gun and a revolver, a pistol in the cavity wall. So it's a pretty big story. So the guns, and the guards are satisfied that the people who are in the house now had nothing to do with this. They had no idea. The strong belief in their working theory is that Wells had hidden the guns there before his arrest and before the incident in 2016. So the pistol or the gun, the two guns, they're going to be forensically examined now, and obviously there is a strong suspicion that one of them may be the murder weapons. But it's just incredible. That was the murder was in February 2016, so it was obviously before that because he was arrested quite soon after that. So the guns have been in that cavity wall for maybe 7 or 8 years. And I thought it was really interesting the way happenstance happens all the time. Workmen working in a way. Many times have we come across stories where workmen are doing renovations and they find a skull. On this occasion, they found 2 Soviet-era deadly weapons. So they're being examined by the Garda ballistics section in the technical bureau, and we'll see what happens there. But I just thought it was really interesting. Just happenstance of the workmen finding it, and then happenstance of me finding out about the find.
Yeah, an extraordinary story. And I mean, the entire story of Paul Wells is in itself a fascinating one, maybe something we'll discuss in greater detail. But I can just recall coming in on the end of that trial. What was really unusual about that is if my recollection is correct, I'm fairly certain it is, he was one of the very few people that was on trial for a murder that coming up to the last day of his trial, no one had a picture of him. Because it kind of went under the radar initially, and then sort of kind of when the facts of the case, the shocking facts of it, the fact that Mr. O'Brien had been dismembered, the chainsaw, etc., it started to gain media attention. But Paul Wells had been in custody, so there was no opportunity for anybody to photograph him, and he was, up until this case was not known about. It was relative nobody, and if you sat in the courtroom and you saw him, you would say that he was a relatively normal-looking bloke. Like, you wouldn't have expected that he would have shot and murdered somebody and chopped up their remains with a chainsaw. And I think it has subsequently come out that Paul Wells was, to use the phrase, up to his oxters in organised crime, was involved in all sorts of criminality.
I remember I found out about the arrest at the time, and I was told he was a Republican, and I think he was involved in Republicanism back in the day, wasn't he? I think it was the NLA.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, to the average punter, he was under the radar. He was effectively a Mr. Nobody type figure, and cut that figure in court. Just a normal looking bloke. But it was extraordinary to me that no one had a picture of him at that point. But I know that his family effectively turned against him, because even they felt that he was an evil individual, and they wanted nothing to do with him. And I can actually recall that I remember a photograph was handed out to members of the media on that last day. And that was the first time that we received a photograph of Paul Wells, and we were able to show everybody what he looked like. But it was just the whole thing was an extraordinary case. So yeah, another extraordinary development in an already extraordinary story.
And you're right about the photograph, because we try and source photographs of people charged with serious crimes, and I spent a very, very long time trying to get a photograph of that one, and I just couldn't find one. But interestingly, the victim, Kenneth O'Brien, that was February 2016, and we knew about the body, and the guards confirmed his identity. But that was one of the first times where the guards released a photograph of the victim.
Yeah. It's becoming a more commonplace now, isn't it?
Yeah, they are starting to do that now.
So shall we move on to the subject of Barbie Kardashian? And just to say on this subject that we're going to just talk about the facts of Barbie Kardashian's incarceration in Limerick Women for Prison. And the reason why we covered this story was because the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has now publicly commented on it after being asked a question about it. And the Taoiseach indicated, when prompted about this subject, that he would have an issue with a transgender woman who is convicted of a violent offence and who is of a danger to other women being housed in a women's prison. And as a result of that public commentary, we're now following up on that story. And I felt it was important, whatever your opinion is on this very controversial issue, and we're not here to debate that. We felt it was important to highlight, well, what are the exact conditions that Barbie Kardashian is housed in? Because it is an unenviable position for the Irish prison service, certainly, because it's a controversial for many reasons, because Barbie Kardashian is an extremely violent individual, and psychological reports and background done on her shows that she has a violent nature and that she is a danger to women and that she is unrepentant when it comes to her crimes, which is that she threatened to rape and murder and torture her own mother, and she is unrepentant in that sense. And she's imprisoned in a women's prison. And so this debate has started over whether she should be housed in a female prison because she is a danger to women.
And there's no doubt that Barbie Kardashian is a danger to women prisoners at Limerick Prison. And the prison service are aware of that. And they're doing everything they can to protect women from Barbie Kardashian.
Yeah, and that's the aspect of the story that I wanted to highlight, because I think the asking of that question and the commentary that was made generated discussion on the internet that was, I would say, misinformed. And that is, I think there was a perception there that Barbie Kardashian was mixing with the general prison population in Limerick Prison. And I knew that not to be the case, but I wanted to even further clarify exactly what position and what were the circumstances that Barbie Kardashian is placed in prison. Now look, the Irish Prison Service does not comment ever on an individual prisoner, on an individual case. So we rely entirely upon our sources to obtain information. But I thankfully was able to obtain quite a bit of information, which I believe to be 100% accurate in relation to Barbie Kardashian's incarceration in Limerick Prison. And I thought it was worth highlighting this for the reasons I've mentioned. So Barbie Kardashian is under a very strict, under a certain rule, effectively solitary confinement regime within Limerick Women's Prison. And that means that she is for 21 hours a day, for 21 hours a day, she is in her cell in solitary confinement. She is not allowed mix with any other prisoner. And I am told, because of her violent nature and because of the threat that she poses to other prisoners, as far as the prison service are concerned, she will never mix with another prisoner. And that's important to stress that fact before I go further. So in relation to that solitary confinement, as I said, she's 21 hours in that cell. And then for the 3 hours out of that cell, she is totally alone, isolated from any other prisoner, and she is escorted by prison staff to and from where she needs to go. So if she is brought into the yard or brought to the gym or brought to any other particular activity that she's doing in the prison, she is accompanied at all times by several members of prison staff. The landing that she is on is, I'm told, it is a small corridor comprising of 4 inmates. Comprising of a handful of inmates. We don't know the exact number, but it is a very small number of inmates. And I understand that Barbie Kardashian and another inmate are transgender. And then there are a number of other inmates that are housed on that particular section of the prison because of the type of nature of the crime that they've committed. So, for example, Ciaran Harrington, who is a convicted child killer, is housed on that landing. And in her case, she's housed there for her own protection because she's a child killer. She's not going to be popular among the prison population. And there is a perceived threat to her safety were she mixing with the general prison population. So that's important to stress, that the prison service are in a very difficult position here when it comes to Barbie Kardashian. She cannot mix with any other prisoner. And basically, look, this is the opinion of my sources only, who I think are well versed in this subject, and I'm only expressing what they have said to me, which is that even if you were to move Barbie Kardashian, she's going to be put in the exact same strict regime. If you put her in a different prison, if you put her in a male prison, she is going to be in 21-hour-a-day regime, never mixing with any other prisoner. So no matter what happens on this subject, she will always be isolated. She will never be able to mix because of her violent nature. And that's just the facts of the matter. Another thing that I found out today, and I'm doing a story hopefully tomorrow for tomorrow's paper. By the time this pod comes out, it'll be out. Another massive issue that the Irish Prison Service faces is overcrowding. And I'm told that the prison bosses really would prefer to have Barbie Kardashian in a totally isolated landing all by herself. That's how that's the gravity of this situation, that they would nearly rather it's not ideal for them to have her even on the same landing as other female prisoners, as even though none of these prisoners ever mix. There is an opportunity for these prisoners when they are out of their cell to potentially pass other cells, walk past them, and it's not an ideal situation basically.
No, and as we say, Paul, facts are friendly. So yes, so she's not on her own by herself, isolated in that sense. That there are women on that land, and we've spoken about this. There are two child killers, and I think there's another woman possibly convicted of another very serious offence. But there are women orderlies who would clean the corridor and stuff. And I know that Paddy O'Gorman, a legendary RTE reporter, has done some interviewing of former women prisoners in Limerick who have spoken about, verbal abuse. Prison service protect women on that landing. They absolutely do. But there have been anecdotal issues about verbal abuse.
Yes, and I was told that Barbie Kardashian has made alleged threats to prison staff, and they have been subjected to that, and that's caused immense stress for prison staff involved. She's a difficult prisoner, that's definitely true. But in terms, they're constantly monitoring those threats and safety concerns, and she is actually, there are 4 locked doors, I'm told, between her and the general prison population, and it's a totally separate landing as well. As I said, it's an unenviable position for the prison service, but they have told us that they are reassessing their policy on the issue of transgender inmates, for example, and how they handle the more violent inmates as well, separately, that they have in solitary confinement. And in the case of Limerick Prison, we know that there is a new women's facility that is set to be opened. That's going to be a game changer for the prison service, and it's going to give them a lot more space to deal with. And I think, at least in the interim, Barbie Kardashian is going to be housed in some way in that facility. But I'm also told that they are looking at the UK model, and they are considering several different options, including the possibility of having transgender inmates, for example, that identify as female, in a male facility. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to go down. I don't have an opinion on that. I'm not going to give an opinion on that, but that is an option that they are examining. So it's a hugely controversial issue, and it is one that they are still that they are actively, closely examining, and they're going to make a decision on in the coming months.
I think the Scottish, example of the Scottish case has probably frightened powers that be in Ireland, because that was massive. It was Isla Gray, I think, a rapist who identifies as a woman and was put in a women's prison, and there was a massive outcry on that, and then they were subsequently moved. So I would say that you're right. They would probably examine putting violent transgender women in male prisons, or the solution is, I know that we've spoken a bit, Peter Tatchell has said one solution is to have a transgender wing. I don't know if Ireland has the capacity for that, but as you say, they're building a new area in Limerick Prison, women's prison. So look, it's a massive headache for the prison authorities, and I don't envy them.
Yeah, and I mean, everyone and their mother now has expressed an opinion on this. I spoke to local TD Willie O'D today, who told me, in his opinion, that a prisoner like Barbie Kardashian should just be put into a male facility. So that's his opinion, the opinion of the local politician TD down there. No doubt it is going to continue to be debated, but at the moment, the prison service, I think they would say that she's in the best position they can put her in at the moment. There is nothing else they can do in terms of her confinement, because under the law, she is confined in the only place that they can confine her. But that is something that is being politically debated at this very moment.
But even just to explain this, the prison service is ordered to commit a prisoner to a certain court, and if someone has a gender recognition certificate and they're legally a woman, the prison service have to bring them there. They can't. It's not as if they're gatekeeping and go, you can go in there, and that's what they're told to do.
Yes, but on that point, I'm not saying it means anything, but even if she's moved to a male facility tomorrow, her conditions will not change. It has been accepted that she is so violent that she will never be able to mix with any prisoner, male or female. So no matter where this prisoner is housed, it is likely for the rest of her sentence, which is 4.5 years. I think she's served nearly a year of that. She will be effectively isolated from any prison population. So she is a unique case in her own right. I don't think it is fair to necessarily debate this as an issue when it comes to transgender prisoners necessarily, because Barbie Kardashian is an exceptional example in terms of her violent nature. And so it's what's primarily, I think, a concern for the prison service is the threat to everyone's safety, including Barbie Kardashian's safety, because I think, as my source was telling me, one of my sources was telling me, there are other prisoners who would be a danger to Barbie Kardashian as well. So there is every aspect to consider when it comes to housing a difficult prisoner, a seriously violent prisoner like Barbie Kardashian.
I just want to clarify one thing about what Peter Tatchell said. I'm reading here. He said that if there any woman, including trans women, with a history of sexual or violent offences against women should not be placed in the general population of women's prisons unless there is strong evidence that they have reformed. Even then, they should be subject to monitoring and review. And he said if there is a trans woman and is an ongoing threat to other women, they should be placed in a segregation unit within a women's prison and not permitted to mix with the general women's prison population without supervision.
Well, I mean, that's already the case in this case. And I think that's why it's important to highlight this, because I think a certain perception was put out there on social media that she was in the general prison population, and she isn't.
No, but there are women in that landing. We know that there are 2 trans women, and then there are 2 or 3 other women in that. So it's slightly different than that. Yes, but they're all in the same landing.
Yes, I accept that, but they do not mix. They put them out each individually, But look, as I said, it's an unenviable position, and one that is already publicly they have stated this, the government and the IPS, that it's a policy that is being reevaluated at this very moment.
As again, just to stress, Paul and I were totally sticking to the law enforcement and criminal justice aspect of this. Anybody else can have other arguments about, and there are plenty of arguments in this.
Yes, now something we're going to just speak about briefly because it will develop on Friday, and I'm sure we might speak about it in greater detail on Monday, depending upon what happens. But that is the impending appeal results for murderer Graham Dwyer. And Graham Dwyer was convicted of the 2015 murder of Elaine O'Hara. It's an infamous case. No doubt everybody has, to a certain degree, a good memory of this case. It hit the headlines, the front pages, nearly every single day that it was on, and Mick sat in every day of that trial. But Graham Dwyer is set to get the result of the appeal of his conviction tomorrow, Friday. Is that right, Mick? Yeah,
and the main thrust, there were several points that they made, including one that there was no cause of death found, scientific cause of death found, presented to the jury. So the appeal, one of the arguments of the appeal is, well, how can there be proof she was murdered? And they did talk about, we know that Miss O'Hara had mental health issues, and they raised the issue of suicide. But one of the main points of appeal is that Graham Dwyer's mobile phone data was used as part of the evidence. We all know, up until recently, all mobile phone data, messages and call logs for every phone handset and account were kept for 2 years. And as part of the Garda investigation, Garda used that. They used his work phone to match and to sort of cross-reference evidence from 2 other phones, the master and the slave phone, that were found in Vartu Reservoir in County Wicklow around the same time that Elaine's body was found in September 2013. And that was a crucial point. So they want that. They say that evidence shouldn't have been used and shouldn't be put to the jury. It's now up to the judges to decide. The 3 judges of the Court of Criminal Appeal, they can do 3 things. They can uphold the verdict of murder, in which case Dwyer goes back to jail. They can quash the murder and order a murder verdict and order a retrial, or they can quash the verdict and say he has to walk. So we'll know soon enough.
Yeah, we will. And you can never really predict how these decisions go. And I mean, these eminent judges are considering every aspect of the law. Just briefly, we're not really going to discuss it in this pod, but there was eyebrows raised at a decision made in the Supreme Court in relation to Patrick Quirke and the investigation into him, and it was found that the seizure of certain devices by the Gardaí was actually illegal. And we've yet to see what the repercussions of that are in relation to his conviction. We will find out more about that next week. So, you just don't know which way it's going to go. It's up to the judges. We keep saying that, but we don't know what way it's going to go.
And just say the Court of Appeal rules, because there has been a European ruling that blanket access and everybody's phone data like Dwyer's went against European law. But there is a provision, without overcomplicating things too much. The Supreme Court has ruled that there is a thing, an absence of mala-fides. Gardaí can act illegally, but at the same time think they were acting legally. So they might just and it's like even with the Jerry Hodge thing about the
just got to mention
NSU evidence up north, that the judges ruled that was illegal, but they let it in.
Yeah, I mean,
even though they acted illegally.
It's Justice Tara Burns, I think, said something to the effect of that the Gardaí acted in good faith, and that they did not realise that they were in breach of the law in relation to that.
So, the ruling about the accessing data was in 2018. The Dwyer stuff was accessed in 2013, and the murder trial was in 2015. So maybe the judges will go, look, it went against European law, but they didn't know at the time, and they did act in good faith. So we'll see, but it's up to the judges.
Can't wait to see what happens
there. It's going to be fascinating.
Are you going to be there?
I've got COVID, I can't go.
Oh, yeah, okay. Right, well, listen, we think we'll wrap it up there. I think we've discussed quite a few topics, but as we keep saying, that's why we're doing this Week in Crime, because there's so much that we cover that we nearly forget how much we're covering. So we'll be back next week where we'll be covering a couple more interesting topics, hopefully, including it's the 30th anniversary of the disappearance of Annie McCarrick, and we'll be discussing that in some detail next week as well. So thanks very much for listening.
Thanks, everybody.